Hey everyone, and welcome to my channel. I am the Todd I Am, and today we are back in Creeklore Zoo, and in this episode we are building a habitat for the Baird's tapir and the Colombian white-faced capuchin. When I started this build, I thought I had pressed the record button, but clearly I didn't, so the barrier has already been placed. I do apologize for that. Next video I will make sure that the entire recording catches the building of the barriers as well. But to be honest, I really didn't have a clear vision of this enclosure when I started it, so I pretty much just made it up as I went. I do like how it turned out though. I'm proud of what it became, having no idea what I wanted to do when I started. I guess just sometimes you have to begin building and see where your imagination takes you. I did know that I wanted to combine the tapir and the capuchin because I like the contrast of their behaviors. The tapir just seems much more mellow and typically just meanders around the enclosure, keeping to itself, just doing its own thing, while the capuchin, on the opposite end of that, is always on the move. It's very active. It's constantly running around and jumping, climbing, playing, never sits still. So I just liked the contrast of the dynamics between the two animals and how they just normally behave. I really wanted to make this as interactive for the guests as I wanted to, so I do have a upper deck with a food court built into it so that the guests can go up top, have a little food, have a little drink, sit down for a bit, but then just have this upper platform to where they can look over the enclosure and just kind of get an aerial view of all the monkeys, the tapirs doing their thing. They do have the option of, on the lower level, right at the ground level, there's going to be that glass barrier there so they can really get an up-close personal view of the activities of these animals. But once I go up top to where that food court is and to that upper deck, there is an elevated pathway that loops throughout the entire enclosure. I really wanted to make it not so static to where it just is one level of a loop, so I did actually make this a double level where one side of it goes underneath the other, all the way towards the back to make sure they get a good view because it is such a large enclosure. Excuse me, I wanted to get my guests as close as I could to these animals so they can have some decent viewing points. I mean, let's be honest, you could have the animals standing right next to them and they're going to complain about the view. So I was kind of making this up in my mind. What would I want to do and how would I want to go about this exhibit if I were going to be the one to visit? And not only would I want to go to the bottom on the ground and kind of see them through the glass and get a really close look at them, but I want to go as deep into the enclosure as I could. So I kind of imagine myself, if I were put on this pathway, where would I want to go and what would I want to see? And that's kind of the direction I took this. Again, I was just kind of making this up as I went. I really had zero plans for this build as I went. So you kind of see how I will have changed a few things. Not everything stays the way I wanted it because as it went, it got a little more fluid and I had other ideas and I liked the way some things looked, but I decided to change other parts of it because it just didn't look the way I really wanted it to look. But, you know, and like I said, as you can see, that I do try to make these habitats as natural as I can. I make them large. I try to mimic the wild environment as much as I could to give them plenty of space and plenty of big enough area for them to really portray their personalities and their behaviors. All the while still letting the guests be able to see them, which is again why I did this big pathway loop all the way through it. But because I want them to, the animals to experience as much of a natural habitat as I could, That's why these enclosures are just ridiculously larger than they need to be. But in Creeklore, I try to make the animals have all the space they would expect to have in the wild, and plus the fact that I'm planning on filling up the entire map area of this zoo. And so with the ideas and the plans that I have for this zoo in the future, that these animals are really going to need these larger spaces to really fill up this zoo and make it look like a more really interactive experience for the guests, where it's not just, oh, okay, they're in a small exhibit, I can see them from where I am and be done with it. So for that matter, I do make these a lot larger than these. Some will be a little bit smaller and a little bit more reasonable, but for the most part, these exhibits, these enclosures, habitats, whatever you want to call them, are going to be much larger than the zoo requirements actually list these animals to need. Excuse me. But with all that being said, I hope you enjoy the rest of the speed build. And as always, there are cinematics at the end. I hope you will stick around, watch all that. If you like what you see, give me a like down there at the bottom of it. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. That way you'll be able to know when new content comes out. Any comments, suggestions, critiques, I am always welcome to those. So throw those down there at the bottom as well. But as always, until next time, I hope you guys enjoy. you.